long this goes on.
So the question is, has their optimism peaked, right? I mean, because the survey could be true and probably is true that people felt great or feel great now.
Yep.
Is that about to change?
I don't think so, because I think that there are other things that are happening. So you've got the tax cuts that have been enacted, and I think those have been extremely helpful to people across the board. And we've been doing a lot of work on that at Heritage and Heritage Action. And those tax cuts are impacting not just individuals, but they're impacting the business environment, and they're allowing businesses to have more cash on hand to actually do the things that they need to do. And so I think you'll see more of that going forward. I think the more that that law is allowed to kind of maturate, I think you will see added growth there, and so I think it's a good thing. I think we just all are going to keep an eye on what's going on with the trade issue, and our hope is that this is not peaked.
It definitely adds to costs, right? I mean, I've talked to some business leaders who one last week described it to me as kind of a nuisance. In other words, it's not killing the business, but we'd be making more money. Our profit margins would be better if it weren't for, in this case, it was the steel and aluminum tariffs. But in the journal piece, they talk about really small companies, right? Some are technology based. Some I think one was making an electric scooter, motorcycle, or whatever it was. Some of the parts are coming in from China. So if you don't have other options, those are the type of companies, they can't stand it for all that long, right? They will
I mean, like we said, we at Heritage have always believed in free trade, and we think that there are adverse impacts to tariffs like this. That said, the president, I think, has done a pretty good job of identifying that China is a very bad actor on the national stage here when it comes to this, and he's doing something about it. So I think we are in a kind of, let's wait and see mode. We don't want this to go on for a long time. We want to get a resolution to this. But in terms of right now, how this is impacting, I think it's actually impacting politically. It's impacting Republicans and conservatives pretty well, because the optimism is there, and it still will continue.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? We just had the two guests on in the previous segment, and Mustafa, who was representing the Democratic side in all of this, started to talk about trade. And what I started to say at the end, I'll bring it up with you as well, is that the Democrats don't necessarily have an argument to be made on the other side of this. Maybe if Bill Clinton was running, they would, or somebody from that kind of ilk in the Democratic Party. But now, to me, they largely agree with the president. So even if there's nobody on the other side of this trade or the other side of this argument on trade, so how does that affect the midterms?
Yeah, I always think it's interesting. I think one of President Trump's greatest accomplishments is he's made free traders out of the Democratic Party.
Right.
And so but you're right. I mean, I don't think their heart is in their criticism of the president.
And by the way, your side either. I know you guys are maybe, but the elected officials, I mean, he's like a 90% approval rating with the people in the Republican Party. So it seems like elected officials, even though many in Congress, maybe not all, but majority of Republicans in Congress do not approve of the president's trade policies or have it in their careers, but they don't speak out that much against him. Not that much.
Well, I think that's right, but I also think that the issue is that they recognize that the president has his pulse on something here. I mean, there are real communities across this country that have been hurt by globalization and free trade, and there's got to be a way for us to address that as conservatives, and I think we need to do a better job as conservatives.
What's the way? You don't think it's tariffs?
No, I don't think it's tariffs. What I'm telling you is I think that conservatives have to do a better job of actually, maybe it's job training, maybe it's vocational training, apprenticeships, things like that that can help people move from one sector to another. And I think there are ways to do that at the state level, not at the federal level, that would be pretty helpful.
Yeah, but the president's hit a nerve clearly with all of this, and it sells with his base, and it's working there, even by people, by the way, in that base, maybe that work in industries that might get hurt. I've talked to some of them out at his rallies and other places that say, yeah, I still support him on this, even if it's going to hurt me individually. So do you think, what is the impact of trade policy in the midterm elections, or is there none?
I think the impact is good for Republicans, actually. I think because the president is taking that constituency seriously, I think that matters, and that helps him in places like Ohio, where we saw a pretty significant victory last night in their ability to hold on to that district.
You really think it is, even though it was plus 11 for Trump?
Yeah, I actually do. I mean, I think that all the tailwinds were with the Democrats there, and that thing was going to the Democratic Party until Trump came in and did what he did.
Right.
And the dynamic you had there was just a lot of people checked out. You had a lot of Republicans who were checked out who didn't even know what was happening in the district until the last couple of days. And so I think it was a significant victory, because I think at some point Democrats have to start putting points on the board. And so, they won in the special election in Pennsylvania, but I think they need to put points on the board, and they can't claim moral victories over and over again. There's no doubt it's going to be a really tough midterm. We have a lot of work to do to hold these seats. I mean,
especially in the House.
Yeah, in the House. I mean, we're getting involved on our end. We're going to support at least a dozen candidates and try to hold these districts. It's going to be tough, but it's doable.
All right, Tim, good to see you. Good talk.
Thanks for having me.